How's it going, everyone? This is Let's Talk with JMO, and I'm JMO, and we're here with Aviraj Basnet. How's it going, man?
Pretty good, pretty good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Can't complain. It's a beautiful morning. A little cold, but can't
A
complain
little
about
early.
that. Yeah, a little early. So, why don't we start off with you talking a little bit about yourself and tell everyone, like, what you do, where you come from, stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. I'm a pilot and flight instructor by trade. I kind of, I'm from Chicopee, Massachusetts. I'm originally from Nepal, but I pretty much grew up in the U.S. But yeah, it's been a long journey to figure out what I wanted to do. But yeah, as of the last I'd say 2 years, 3 years now. I've been flying, and finally worked hard enough where I can start doing it for a job. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at now.
Cool. So what really got you into flying? Because I know you were, or I don't know if you still are, but you were a EMT before that, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's a funny story. So like I said, I was born in Nepal, and when I was a kid, I'm talking 2 or 3 years old. My earliest memories were back in Nepal with my dad, and he would take me to the airport, to like the airport fence, and we just watched planes all day coming in and land. And so my dad always wanted to be a pilot, and he never did. But I had that bug since I was young. So when I moved to the U.S. when I was four or so, um, my whole life growing up I was like, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm going to be a pilot. Everyone thought I was going to be a pilot throughout high school. And then somewhere along the line, halfway through high school, I kind of had a shift in my thought, I guess. And I was like, no one really becomes a pilot. That's kind of
Yeah.
an unheard of thing. You don't go to school to become a pilot. How do you even do that? And on top of that, I was thinking more of job security. I was thinking of, I was like, all right, well, I wanna have a nice stable job. I want to go to school for a couple of years and come out. So somewhere along the line, I decided, okay, I'll try to go in the medical field, and I do like helping people. I like talking to people. I always thought I was a people person. So I was like, this is a good job for me, and I didn't know exactly what, but I was like, oh, I'll go either a nurse or a PA or a doctor, maybe something along those lines. So I I had applied to only schools or colleges down in Florida for flying.
Hmm.
And up until this point, I was dead set. And then senior year, my guidance counselor said, hey, just in case you change your mind and you want to have more options locally, why don't you just send an application to UMass Amherst? And I was like, all right, whatever, I'll do it. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
go there, but I'll do it. And yeah, sure enough, a couple months later, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll go into the medical field, and
Yeah.
I ended up going to UMass Amherst. So throughout college, I was gearing up for something in medicine. So I was pre med for 2 years, and I was taking bio classes, chem classes, and they were okay. I was interested in them, but I started working as similar to a PCT. I worked as a home health aide, pretty much,
Yeah.
at this house where we had 5 or 6 individuals, and they weren't able to speak, and they weren't able to take care of themselves at all. So I was waking up at 5:50 and driving over, and I'd have to give these people a full bath, feed them, take care of them, you know. And so I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm doing something that's in the medicine field, but this isn't something I want to do for the rest of my life.
Understandable.
And
Yeah.
then I became an EMT after that. So I went to EMT school, and I'm like, maybe this is more like it. It sounds like more action packed, more of my speed, something I'd like. And so I ended up, I was a 4 or 5 month ordeal, and I worked hard, and I got good grades, so they hired me immediately afterwards. And that is the job that really just changed my life, man. So I um, I became an EMT. I started working, and I was just having a blast. I it was everything I wanted. I was doing medicine. I was administering medications. I was the one showing up, lights and sirens to a call, the first person to see things, the
Mm-hmm.
first person to decide what's going on, make a decision. I was the one telling the police and fire department where I need them. And I was the one also talking to doctors and nurses once we brought them to the hospital and telling them what I did. And so I love that job. Unfortunately, it doesn't pay very well. And being an EMT it's hard to make a career as an EMT. Most people use it as a gateway job, and they either move on to a paramedic or other healthcare jobs. But so it's difficult to make a career out of it. But I loved it, and it really, what it did for me was it scratched that itch that I had, that I wanted to be in medicine. I thought it was cool, and I got to help people, and for me, it really did it. And I
Yeah.
was thinking to myself at that point, I'm like, why am I going to spend another 100 grand and go to medical school and take more of these chem classes that I could barely wrap my head around, and put myself in some crazy debt to do what I'm doing now, except I get to do less. I don't get to show up and be the badass, and
Yeah.
I kind of got to stand in the corner of the hospital room and make decisions like this and let everyone else do all the fun stuff.
True.
So I was like, you know what? This can be my side hobby. This can be my fun job that I just keep around. And I'm like, why don't I do something and that's when I clicked for me. I'm like, I need to do something I really want to do. I want to have fun when I go to work. So I always thought about it. I'm like, I always wanted to be a pilot. And what happened to that? So I went to my local airport and I found a flight school. It was a mom and pop shop, and I took my first intro flight and I just fell in love with it. And I was like, I got to do this.
That's
So from
awesome.
there, I changed my major to business, and it was the closest. It was basically an easy enough degree that I could have time to study and go to flight school right after
Mm-hmm.
class. And so I worked at it I got my private pilot license, then I got instrument rated, then I got my commercial pilot license, and then I became a flight instructor.
Okay. So are you?
Yep.
So when you got into the flight school, where is that flight school, anyways? Is that the one out of
Um,
Northampton or?
yeah. So I
Okay.
work at two. I recently just got on with Northampton Airport, and
Okay.
then my other flight school that I work at is just near West Hartford, Connecticut. It's at Robertson Airport.
Okay. Eh,
Yeah.
why don't you take us through a little bit about um, like the steps it takes to like become a licensed pilot? Because I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people actually understand that. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound
I
like
know
you
that's
knew
something I
before
didn't
either.
understand. Yeah.
The way
Yeah.
you
Exactly.
explained it to
So
me off podcast, it seems other than like the in class sessions, in terms of hours wise, it seems more straightforward than I thought it would have been.
it really is. It really is. So there's a couple different licenses. So there's a recreational pilot, who's flying for fun, who wants to fly his friends and family, all the way up to the commercial pilot license. So the first level that most people get is the private pilot. Now, what a private pilot license allows you to do is fly your friends and family. You can go anywhere. You have to fly in what's called visual flight conditions, or visual flight rules. So there's some rules you have to follow as far as weather. You have to stay certain distances from clouds, and you got to fly in certain visibility. Um, but you're not allowed to make any profit. So you are purely a for fun pilot that you can fly with your friends. You can share the cost with your friends, but it has to be even. You can't make any profit from it. So that's your first license, and that the FAA requires you to get 40 hours of flight time minimum. And of those 40 hours, your first 10 or 15 or even 10 or 20, you're focusing on the fundamentals of what flying is, controlling the plane, learning to land the airplane. And then you got to you eventually have what's called your first solo. So the instructor cuts you loose, he signs some papers, and you go up and do a couple landings on your own for the first time with no instructor. Then you have to do certain cross country flights, they call them, which are really just flights from 50 miles of a greater distance to another airport. You start to do some of those, and then you got to do some on your own solo. Then you got to do some night training, and then some test prep, and then you're ready for the practical test. So the practical test is a couple of hours of an oral one-on-one, exam with an examiner. He asks you questions. You pretty much have a conversation where he gauges your knowledge, and then you get in the airplane and you fly an hour or two with the examiner, and he tests you on certain maneuvers and things you need to do for the test. There's also a written test you take beforehand. Um, and the written test, it's like 100 questions. You need a 70 to pass, and you need that to take your practical test. Besides that, you need to be able to get a medical certificate so that you're healthy enough to fly. And as far as the ground school, most of it is on your own.
Oh,
There are programs where you go into a class. They're more expensive, and I did it through a ground school program. So I was doing all the home study on my own, flying with my instructor, and then you get your private pilot license. So that's the first step, is becoming a private pilot, because from there, you can start to build your hours up. And then you get what's called an instrument rating, which takes, roughly just about the same amount of time as a private pilot, 50 to 60 hours, 40 hours is more like it. And what that teaches you to do is the protocols of flying in complete instrument conditions, we call it, which is zero visibility, weather, advanced knowledge of weather, and now you're flying in the airspace system, and you're flying in a way that in the same way that the airlines do. You really start to feel like a professional pilot. When you're VFR as a private pilot, you fly along, and you can do whatever you want. Air traffic control really doesn't have a say, unless you're in some certain airspace, of course.
mm-hmm.
But in instrument flight rules, now you're under the watch of air traffic control. So you're learning to fly with zero visibility. They put goggles on you when you're flying that block all the windows out.
Oh,
So
wow.
you're flying as if you're flying in fog and visibility all the way down to 200 feet over the runway. And you got to learn to navigate, make sure the airplane's safe, and get the airplane down to 200 feet over the runway, where the hope is you'll see all the lights of the runway through the fog, and you'll be able to land the airplane. So it's a much more advanced training. And once you become instrument rated, and that's the most rewarding one, I would say, because as a private pilot, you fly around, you go to airports, you land in great weather, but the minute there's a couple of crazy clouds looking in the sky, or a thin layer of clouds, you're like, well, I can't go, got to stay with the clouds. But IFR, now you're flying above the clouds, through the clouds, so you start to feel like a real professional. And from there, you're just building your time. So you need a total of 250 hours from there. So you'll do a lot of flying on your own, and then you can practice your test prep, and then you're a commercial pilot is your next license. And that one's pretty quick. You can get it in very short amount of time. And you're learning masterful control of the airplane now.
Yeah.
You're learning to make precise movements, keep your passengers happy. You're making calculations to a finer level, where the FAA trusts you to be in charge of paying customers and cargo.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have this misconception that just as a commercial pilot, you're able to fly for the airlines. That's not the case. So I'm a commercial pilot. I can't fly for the airlines yet. I'm a single engine land commercial pilot. I can fly, small charter companies, anything that's single engine I can do. The airlines have separate rules and a separate license that you require. So the airlines require 1,500 hours of experience. And for a lot of people, that's very difficult to get. 1,500. I mean, when you're a commercial pilot, you have 250.
So, do they have you go and fly on a 2-engine plane first, or does that come after?
Yeah, that's kind of my next step. So I plan on getting that in the next 6 months or so. But what I did was, I want to go to the airlines eventually.
Okay.
So I want 1,500 hours of flight time. And right now, or when you get your commercial pilot, you only have 250, right? And now renting an airplane is very expensive. You can split the cost with your friends, sure. But it's still 125 to 150 an hour for the flight time, as engine time, they call it, or Hobbs time. But it's a lot of money. You got to be,
Yeah,
you got to have
exactly.
100,000 in the bank to get to 1,500 hours like that. So the next step for most people, and what I did, was I became a flight instructor. And now all my hours of teaching also count towards my total flight time. So I'm getting paid, and I'm acquiring flight time. So in a year and a half or so, I'll be at 1,500 hours. And then From there, I'd like to go to the airlines. Now, the only thing I have left to do between now and then is get my multi-engine license, like you said,
Yeah.
and that's pretty quick. It takes 4 to 5 hours,
Oh, okay.
but
So it's
but
marginal in comparison.
it once you get to this point, then it's pretty marginal. Yeah. So, I'm almost there. I'm paying my dues and doing what I
Yeah.
got to do. But I do love teaching, and it's great to be flying every day and kind of sharing my passion and knowledge with newer pilots and helping them along the same journey I'm on right now. So
That's actually kind of interesting that you're also teaching as a flight instructor now, because didn't you actually teach the EMT course that
I
our
did, and I
friend Nate
still
was
do it.
in?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So yeah, after the EMT story is kind of funny. I think with being an EMT, I gained a lot of experience really quickly my first year.
Hmm.
I worked a ton because I was in school. I was trying to pay for flight school, so I worked a ton, and I guess you can call it. A lot of people said I was a black cloud in the beginning, so I would just get the worst calls that some people will work a couple years and not get.
Wow.
But I'm grateful for it because it did give me good experience.
Yeah.
And then I was offered to be an instructor, and I've been doing that ever since. So I guess teaching is something I enjoy, I think, and
That's
so it's good to
awesome.
be in that position.
And it seems like you might like continue to do it in other aspects too.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think this is something that's going to be a part of my life now.
Yeah. So do you want to fly like, I think you said this earlier that you wanted to fly commercial passenger jets, correct?
Yeah, for the airlines. Yep.
Yeah.
Eventually, I would love
Yeah.
that. That'd be a cool job.
Is it kind of like the whole what brings you on to it more than like just flying in general? Is it like the travel to different places, or is it kind of just straight up
Yeah,
flying?
I guess a part of it has to be the glamour that comes behind it. It's cool. I mean, I like any job where I'm flying.
Yeah.
Um, but there's something really cool about waking up and not knowing, where you're gonna be and knowing what your schedule is gonna be. And a part of it is I'm also a people person. So
Yeah.
I like the idea of carrying passengers. I like the idea of interacting with them and guiding them safely to their destination and connecting the country and maybe the world someday. I like that a lot. Whereas some pilots I know they want to go cargo. They like the benefits of being a cargo pilot better. I think I don't know if the airlines will be my one stop and full, final destination as far as my flying career, but it's something that's definitely on my bucket list, and I've always wanted to do. Even as a kid,
Yeah.
those are the kind of planes I watched with my dad landing at the airport, and that was always in my mindset.
Did you did you ever consider like the military as like a route, or was that not really?
Yeah, I did. There's a lot of routes in flying, which is one of the great aspects of that this career. I did consider the military. Again, I'm very much an adrenaline junkie. I like doing jobs that are where I'm fast paced and working and thinking on my feet. So
Yeah.
part of my flight instructor training is I had to go up in an aerobatics airplane and I had to do a couple of spins and things like that in case a student were to ever put me in one, how I
Hmm.
have to be able to recover. And I flew with a former F-16 fighter pilot as my
That's
instructor for that.
awesome.
Yeah, and we flew in this stunt plane, and we sat down after, and he's like, "Hey, you could do this. You could do this." And for the longest time, I thought about it, and it's something that from time to time still pops in my head. Um, you know, but the only thing for me is I'm not. It's a fault of mine, but I'm not great at taking orders.
Oh no,
you
I
know,
understand that
at,
completely.
at the end of the day, you are a soldier, and I have total and utmost respect for the armed services and everyone that makes that sacrifice. But I don't know how great I would be at doing that, and also it's the commitment. The commitment time is what really did it for me. A lot of branches they'll give you 4 years
Yeah.
for in the military. As a pilot, your minimum is 10 years.
Wow.
So it's hard to plan 10 years in the future for anyone. I mean,
Well, you really
now
can't.
if it was just 2, 3, 4 years, I'd probably sign the papers today. But it's hard to, I'm 23 years old. It's hard to gauge where I'd want to be at 33. Would I want a family? would I want to be leaving every couple of months,
To go on
so
deployment and everything. Yeah.
right.
It,
So for that reason, I've been kind of shying away from it.
yeah, that's understandable because that's like an eighth of your life. You're just
Right.
thrown into
Yeah,
it, especially just being a pilot, as
exactly.
like not just in danger, uh, possibly, but as like doing anything for 10
Yeah.
years. That's like a
Yeah.
huge
It's the
commitment.
long, exactly right. You can't even
No.
plan 2 years in your future
No, well,
nowadays. I mean,
it's something like the human mind can't actually conceive more than 5 years in the future. Like we can't even like literally think of it and
yeah.
like for and have it come to for I can't pronounce the word fruition.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
the word I'm trying to
It
say,
sounds right
but
enough for me. I couldn't
yeah.
tell.
So have you heard of those pilots? They're like up in Canada, and they fly these tiny, tiny planes, and they land them up on mountains, and like
Yeah,
literally,
bush
yeah,
pilots.
bush pilots.
Yeah,
Would
yeah,
you ever think
they're a
about
different
doing something
breed.
like that?
Always, still to this day. Yeah, they are a different breed, and they'll land on these little dirt strips on the side of a mountain,
Oh
and
yeah,
they'll land in like 30 feet too. Some crazy amount. Those are some real pilots, man. Yeah, and up in Alaska, they'll do a lot of work. So that stuff is really cool too. It's funny because there's just I'm the kind of guy, I'm like, maybe I won't do this, maybe I'll do that, and you can tell from my career path so far, I jump around a lot, but I just want to dabble into all of it. The bush pilot thing, I've always wanted to do. Um, you have to kind of live in that area to be doing it.
yeah.
Alaska, the North Pacific Northwest, and maybe out the Midwest, but yeah, up here in the Northeast. There's not a ton of it, but yeah, it's definitely something. Even if I don't do it forever, it's something I'd like to at least fly with someone as a bush pilot. What I've been looking at recently is I've been thinking of a way to. So I started. I'm a flight instructor now. I'm flying full time, which means I'm not working as an EMT much anymore. I'll
Mm.
pick up a shift from time to time. I'll teach from time to time, but I'm not working as much. So a lot of my friends and my girlfriend, that they work in the medical field, so I get like a taste. They tell me about their day, they tell me about stuff they've done, and I'm like, oh man, I miss that.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to figure out some sort of segue for my two passions, I guess you can call them. And I've been recently thinking about becoming a med pilot, and flying either patients or organs across the country or across the area to people that need it. So they have airplanes with mobile ICUs inside, and it's a
Wow.
doctor, a paramedic, flight nurse, and a respiratory technician on board usually. And then we'll fly somewhere, pick up a sick patient who needs to come to, let's say, Boston for the great medical care we have. And then we'll fly them straight back to Boston, and an ambulance will meet us at the airport to pick them up. So things like that, or bringing an organ across the country, that stuff I've been looking into. And so who knows, maybe that'll be my next
That's
step.
stuff I didn't even realize existed, like at all. And it's a pretty
Yeah.
cool crossover between like kind of your what seems to be your two loves of work.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. So that's something I'm looking at in the future. I'm still not quite enough. I don't have quite enough experience for it yet. I'm at about 450 hours, which is still considered pretty low time pilot.
I
Um,
mean, it sounds like you're getting there though.
but slowly, yeah, the flight instructing has been helping. I've been getting hours pretty quick. I've been flying a lot. I mean, the winter it's tough in New England. Weather and maintenance wise, you're on the ground quite a bit. But come spring, I'm hoping to get more flying in, and then once I get to 700, maybe I'll give it a shot. So a couple, maybe another 6 months or so, 7 months.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Um, Sounds like you're getting like closer and closer. So does winter play a huge factor in really
It,
getting
it
there?
really does.
Because
It
like
really does.
I'm sure the smaller airports don't have as good maintenance for the runway right when it's snowing and getting all icy.
Exactly. Exactly. There's a lot of factors to it too, because a lot of pilots they'll go down to Arizona and Florida, and there's these schools down there where they have great weather year round, and they'll get everything done in a quarter of the time or half the time that it does up here. But I think flying in the heat of summer and also flying in the cold of winter makes you, you know, a overall better pilot with that experience. So I remember when I was through my private pilot training, and I was working through the winter, and my instructor would cancel 1 out of every 3, or it felt like 1 out of every 2, and I was getting so frustrated, and I was like, oh my god, I'm never gonna get this. Why does my instructor, he hates his job or something, you know? And now I'm in his shoes, and I'm like, I feel so bad because I know how my students feel, but I cancel all the time. And it's a couple of factors. A, if it snows, you got to plow everything. You know, can't have ice on the runway. It takes time. The other thing is you need great weather. Even rain in the winter, you can't fly in. Whereas in the summer, you can, because that rain becomes super cooled and it freezes on your wings upon impact. You can't fly like that. You can't go far. You can't fly in clouds because there's moisture in the clouds that, with the cold temperatures, freeze instantly onto your wings, and they build up ice. And a commercial jet has anti-ice and de-ice available to them, so they can fly through that in the winter. Small planes that are general aviation, like I fly, most aren't equipped for flight into icing. You know, the wings don't have anything to get rid of that. So ice buildup can quickly become a very deadly and serious emergency. So there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. You have to fly in just clear weather, and it's hard to come by those days. And then on top of that, there's days where it's just way too windy for my students to conceivably learn anything. You know, it just tosses you around so much that they're spending money to fly. I want them to actually get something out of their lesson. And if they're just being bumped around in the airplane the whole time, they're going to have a hard time doing that. So
that's an awesome quality for a teacher to have too.
Thank you.
Honestly, I don't know if I'll ever be a student, but seeing that you actually care enough and you're not just like, oh, I'm going to take your money even if this is going to be hard and you're not going to learn anything, because I'm sure there's plenty of instructors and or people that would do that. So I think that's very commendable. Just on a side note,
thanks a lot.
I do want to ask you about your first landing, because I think that would be the scariest pinnacle moment of becoming a pilot. Taking off doesn't seem like that big a deal, but like landing, it's just like, oh shit, I might fucking die here.
Yeah. No, it is. And I think most of my students, that's their fear too, is like the landing is the hard part. Granted, your first landing, I mean, with an instructor is for every flight, right? So you get to try your hand at landing. With the instructor's always there to save you, you know, like the last 10 feet off the ground, he takes it over and he helps you fix it, or he'll do it with you on the controls. So by the time you have your first solo, which is my first landing completely by myself, I think I was pretty far along. I was maybe 17 hours or something in the air. And then I had just done so many practice landings, and I was probably had done 60. And so at this point, my instructor, I remember that day, and I actually filmed it with a GoPro that was mounted, but my instructor, I did a couple flights with landings with him, and then he said, let's go park. And I was like, okay, we're going to park. And the sun was setting, the winds were really calm, it wasn't crazy, it wasn't difficult. And he goes, hey, you want to take this up a couple laps on your own? And I was like, really? I was like, right now? And I was like kind of scared, but I was like, yeah, hell yeah, So he's like, all right, well, why don't you park me over there? I'll step out, and you go do 3 landings and come park the airplane. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I had the GoPros to kind of watch my lessons back, but I had them running. And that is the one single-handed biggest milestone, I think, in every pilot's career. Something they'll never forget is their first solo flight, which includes their first real takeoff and landing by themselves. And I did my private pilot at Westfield Airport at Barnes. And I remember lining up for the runway. I'm telling the tower I'm a student pilot. I just want to do a couple laps. And he clears me for takeoff. I get on that runway, and I do full power, and I'm rolling down the runway. And I remember taking off so quick without my instructor's added weight. You're 100 something pounds lighter, and you take off so much faster. And I think in the video I said something like, oh my God, it's right off the ground, or I didn't even know what I was saying. I was shocked. I think the video's out there somewhere on YouTube, but and then I remember going around. Thank God the winds were so light, and I'm coming down, and at that point, I had done it enough where it's like, I can do this. I know I can do this. It's an unnerving feeling doing it by yourself, where you're like, I can do this. And granted, first landing wasn't the most beautiful landing, but I think it was definitely a decent one. It wasn't a bad landing. And so that's one of the single-handedly most greatest accomplishments you'll have in your life is that first solo flight where you're like, wow, I just flew an airplane by myself, you know? But don't get me wrong, just because that landing was good does not mean my landings are good. Landings, everyone always has this discussion about when do you know how to land? How do you land an airplane? I don't think I really fully understood and figured out landings and having consistently great landings every time until I was a commercial pilot, 250 hours of experience in. Until then, you're just learning every time. You know, you have days where you have great landings and you have days where you just ruin your mood because you land somewhere and you're like, damn it, that landing sucked. You
Yeah.
know, even after your license. So it takes a lot of time and practice to get your landings down. I think I checked the other day. I have 800 landings under my belt now, and I still have days where I'm like, oh, could have been better. You know, could have been smoother, but we'll take it.
So did they ever have you run like a simulator before, or did you run like any simulators before hopping in the
No,
cockpit, or
no,
no?
no. And, I'll have people that walk in the door today at my job that, they paid $100 for a Groupon or an intro flight. I'll give them about 30 minutes of ground training. So I'll explain to them how things work, what I need them to focus on, the do's and don'ts. But after those 30 minutes of talking with me, we'll get in the airplane. I'll have them, I'll help them with a lot of stuff. So starting the engine up and all that, I'll explain what I'm doing. But taxiing the airplane or moving the airplane on the ground, I'll give them the controls to do that. Obviously, I'm there to take over, and we have a system where if I say the words "my airplane," it's hands off. I take over.
Okay.
But so, I'll let them taxi the airplane on the ground. I'll explain to them. I'll even let them take off on their own. So it's full power, and then I'll explain. I'll help them with guiding the airplane, making sure it's straight down the runway. I'll tell them to pull, 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 pull. I'll help them if they're not doing it enough, but I'm like, that's all there is to it. I make it a point to show them that they're flying the airplane and not me. Because, it's not as hard as it looks. The hardest part about being a pilot is not learning to command the aircraft or, have masterful control. I think that's something that almost anyone can learn as long as they're in good medical condition. They don't have any learning disabilities that can hinder them. The hard part of being a pilot is the decision making. Teaching that process is what's hard. You have to learn to be a good decision maker because, those decisions make drastic impacts on the flight. You have to constantly be evaluating what things are going right, what things are going wrong, and what you can do to fix them. And what, you have to make decisions like, when am I the bad guy that tells everyone that's excited to fly, we're not flying today? No matter whether it's someone you've been, you can hype them up for weeks. They're excited to make a video. They're your best friend. They're your girlfriend. They're your parents. And they've been planning this trip. They've spent money, and you have to be the guy sometimes that goes, no, the weather's not conducive to flying, or I'm not comfortable doing this flight. The weather might be beyond my skills as a pilot, and I'm not taking that risk. And that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're disappointing people and when your pride is on the line a little bit. And there's some dangerous attitudes, and a lot of people fall victim to things like get-there-itis, we call it, which is, you just want to get there so bad. You're flying, the weather's getting worse, or you're running out of fuel or things like that, but you're like, I'll just press on, it'll be fine. And you go into bad weather, or you go into things you shouldn't do because you're just so tempted to get there. And that kind of can cloud your mind and things like that, making those decisions and going, all right, I need to divert, or I'm starting to become in an emergency situation here. And before things get worse, I need to land. Even if that means I got to pay for a hotel room in some place I didn't anticipate, decision making is what is the hard part of being a pilot, and hardest part to teach students to get into that mindset of good decision making.
It sounds like there's like a level of maturity you get to, because you don't want to be putting yourself, for one, and other people in dangerous situations. And technically, if you think about it, you're in a fucking metal tube flying hundreds of feet off the ground. Yeah. Seems like a sketchy situation if you were to think about it, if you're like,
to break it down. Lives in your hands.
Exactly.
You have the training, they don't. So they're relying on you to make decisions on their behalf, So it's not fair for a pilot to be doing reckless things like that, especially when you're carrying people on board.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool that you went from a medical place where you're saving lives and helping people out, and you're carrying people's lives now especially if you become a commercial pilot, in like the same sort of way. You're
Yeah.
you're like the guardian of like their fucking fate while they're going from point A to point B.
Yeah, I've never looked at it like that, but I
It's
guess
like
that's a
another
great way. That's a cool way
crossover.
to look at it.
I mean, like I think that's so cool, and I just kind of made that connection. So I was like, that's definitely something you can like hold on your shoulder too. Is just like you kind of always are like, I don't know what you'd call it, like people's like guardian of like fate, kind of. And
I
it's
really
like,
that's a nice compliment. I really appreciate that. I guess that's what the kind of position I really like to be in. I guess
yeah,
that's what I like in a job, and I like having that responsibility.
yeah. I think there's two major things I want to ask you about. One of them kind of goes along with when you were mentioning about the medical field. So dare I
Mm.
ask this? I don't know if it's cardinal sin to ask you this, but would you ever consider doing a helicopter pilot as like medevac?
I think helicopter pilots are badass. I think they have balls of steel. But for a couple of reasons, I'm sticking with fixed wing. I honestly, helicopters scare me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because I don't know enough about them. But for me, the main thing with helicopters is, in a single engine airplane, I lose my engine up at a couple 1,000 feet, and now I basically just turn into a glider,
Mm-hmm.
right? My wings still work. It's just my engine that stops working. So I go for what's called your best glide speed, and I'm just gliding down. And I do this with my students. I show them just how much time you actually have when your engine quits to find a place to land. And these small airplanes, they don't take a ton of, you don't need a 9,000 foot runway to land these things,
Mm-hmm.
So I can find a field in most scenarios, and or a road or a highway, and I can find it usually, you're in a good spot where you can find at least somewhere to try to put it down. Even if you do end up crashing a little bit, you're not going to have life-threatening injuries. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
have, So I like that I have that comfort in a single engine. I turn into a glider. Whereas in a helicopter, I'm thinking, I lose my engine. There's a couple things you can do to cushion your fall, but at the end of the day, what doesn't sit well with me is I feel like I'm just going to turn into a brick,
Yeah.
you know, and you're just coming down. And so that scares me, to
It
be
sounds like
honest with you.
you have a failsafe if things go drastically wrong in a fixed
Yeah.
wing.
Yeah, and maybe I just don't know enough about it. Like, I know I'm not a rotary wing pilot, and there could be a lot of things that go wrong in a fixed wing too. But that's just kind of my judgment of it, and maybe it's biased, and
Hey, I
someone out
mean,
there can correct me. But that's just how I look at it.
I think it's interesting. I didn't know if like there's like an ego thing between fixed wing and helicopter pilots, or if it was just like what you're saying now, which makes more sense, is like survivability if something goes wrong. There's like
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
about that and the whole
I don't. I don't know if it's an ego thing or not. Not that I know of. I don't know of that, but
yeah.
yeah, definitely. I think most helicopter pilots I know, they knew they wanted to fly helicopters from
Mm-hmm.
day one. That's just what they want. And there's cool parts of flying
Oh
helicopters. You can
yeah,
land anywhere.
yeah.
You
That
can
is pretty
go
cool. Have you seen
anywhere. You
those?
don't need a runway.
Have you seen those jets that the military has that like can stop and
Yeah,
land
the
anywhere?
the
Those are,
VTOL aircraft,
yeah,
vertical
VTOL
takeoff and
or
landing, like the F-35s,
yeah.
the Harriers. Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
I wonder how that plays into like decelerate and come to that like full stop. How that all the physics behind that work and how you'd even like do
Yeah.
that as.
I don't know a ton about it, but what I do know is they have what's called thrust vectoring technology. So what they'll do is usually an airplane shoots its thrust out the back that propels them essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those F-35s, it can actually move the nozzle down to the ground, and the thrust is vectored down towards the ground, so they become kind of like a rocket landing almost, and it
Wow,
cushions them down.
that's
And
pretty
that's
awesome.
like very modern technology. That's very cool.
Multi-million dollar
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
technology. So as we're um, getting towards the end of this podcast, I would like to ask you, because I've seen on your Instagram you have some pretty cool videos. I didn't know if you had like a YouTube channel people could check you out at, or like maybe like I could throw your Instagram or something in there so people could see the
Yeah,
cool
no,
stuff you're doing.
I've been trying, I think a lot of my friends do videography for a living, and it kind of given me a little piece of that bug. And lately I've been really about, making cool cinematic edits. And I like Instagram because the videos are just a minute long,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a production, but it's not a crazy production. People can watch for a minute and then move on with their day. So I've been sticking to Instagram for now for my videos. I've considered YouTube in the past, but as of right now, I don't have a YouTube channel. Maybe maybe in the future.
Honestly,
But
that might be a form of to get more flying hours for you because the stuff on your Instagram is very interesting and well edited. I also do this stuff for a living, so I think what you do as like a beginner like is very well
yeah.
done. So what if I were to make a recommendation? I'd say go out and try and do almost a vlog style thing for flying. I think that's a niche group that right now there's cool bush pilot YouTubers that you could probably check out. You just look up bush
Yeah,
pilot
I
and
follow a couple of them.
yeah,
Like I could,
but do the same kind of thing. And
yeah,
if it's something like if you get a certain amount of views, you make money. And if you could form a base and throw out enough marketing, dude, that could be like paying for all of your flight hours if you because
yeah,
it's
that's
an
true.
the videos you have on your Instagram have traction there to where they pick up this there's a different sense of like interest there that you could like work off of, and it's different and it's different from the normal and could get you some viewers. It's just about putting out to an audience the right way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm definitely gonna look more into it and see if yeah, I've seen those flying vlogs. So yeah, I think I get, and I have friends that can help me out with that.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
you're a
maybe that's
people
in the
person.
work.
You got the personality for it too, so it works out. Like you kind of got the perfect storm of like something that could work. It's just about executing correctly.
Wow, awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to like throw out too many compliments, but I'm just telling you like if
No,
I
no,
see
no,
something
no.
that can work, I'm pretty sure I can tell.
Yeah, you
So,
got it. Yeah.
what are your thoughts on like so you said you follow some of those bush pilots on YouTube?
Yeah, I follow Trent Palmer. He flies a little Kit Fox. I think those guys have awesome lives. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I know, he's a drone pilot for a career, and then all the time he has his own airplane. He's got his own backyard runway and hangar, and he just
Wow.
flies his airplane around the Midwest, landing on these crazy little rock formations. And he'll be like, "Look at this, look at this view." And so that's like that's the dream right there. I'm sure it takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of money to get to that point. I mean,
Oh
even those
yeah.
small airplanes, very expensive. Um, and a lot of unfortunate part of being a pilot is you spend the early half of your career in a lot of debt.
Mhm.
So I'm sure he's done a lot of things right to get in that position. But that he's living the dream.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of those videos, and a lot of that is kind of the inspiration for the Instagram videos that I put out from time to time. I'll try to make cinematic edits and stuff, and
Mhm.
I like that I can kind of share my passion and try to show others what it's all about and show others what's so cool about flying. And maybe someone else will get the bug from watching my video, because I got a bug from watching those videos. So
Yeah.
maybe someone will get it from mine.
So have you picked out your next big trip in terms
I
of
have not. I have
where you want to
not.
go
No,
next now? Where are
not
places you've
yet.
flown to?
I've throughout New England. I think I've been to a lot of places. So the furthest south I've been to was Maryland, Ocean City,
Mm-hmm.
Maryland. I've been to quite a few places near New York and New Jersey. My favorites are in the local area. So I'll fly out of Northampton. Block Island is one of my favorites in the summertime, because it saves you so much time. You don't have to take a boat or anything. You just fly 35, 40 minutes from Northampton Airport. You're at Block Island for the day.
Wow.
Then you hang out there all day and you fly home at night, and you're on your own schedule. Or Martha's Vineyard, or by the Cape. I brought my parents to the Cape this summer. And throughout Connecticut, I'll take my friends to dinner sometimes, or, on a
Mm-hmm.
little tour. And then I've flown up north to Maine, Rhode Island, or not Rhode Island, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire,
Mm-hmm.
around there. I'll visit my friends up in Nashville sometimes, and it's cool to get to kind of hop around like that.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're hitting that time where we both gotta get going. So
All right.
I appreciate you coming on. This was really fun.
Thanks a lot
Is
for
there
having
anything
me.
else you'd
Yeah,
like
this was a
to
lot of
say to the
fun.
audience before you get going, or maybe check out
I would
his flight
say
school or the flight
I,
school
I
you
would
work at?
say, if you ever, no matter where you are, whether it's with me or not, consider paying the $9,900 for a little flight lesson, just one. You never know, you might fall in love with it. So it's definitely worth it. And it's out there, and it's not impossible.
Check them out at what are the two Northampton Air?
Northampton Airport and Robertson Airport down in Connecticut.
All right. Well, be sure to, if you're gonna go for one, take a look at his stuff and check out his Instagram. I'll link it down in the bio. And remember, balance, love, and respect. Everyone, have a good day. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks a lot for having me, man.